The TV courtroom had never seen such a raw display of disrespect from someone so young. 12-year-old Tyler Mason stepped into Judge Judy's courtroom with his AirPods Max still on his ears, his newest iPhone lighting up his face, and a look that said he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. His expensive designer sneakers, worth more than some people's monthly car payments, squeaked across the polished floor as he dragged himself toward the defendant's table without even acknowledging the elderly woman whose life he had intentionally damaged just for TikTok attention. What unfolded over the next 8 minutes would become one of the most viral courtroom moments ever, shared tens of millions of times across social media. Judge Judy's reaction quickly turned into a powerful moment for parents, teachers, and anyone who still believed in discipline in a world where kids often seemed beyond consequences. But what makes this story truly unbelievable is that Tyler didn't just receive a warning, and he didn't just lose the case. What Judge Judy did to this entitled 12-year-old was so sharp, so justified, and so perfectly targeted that it didn't just quiet Tyler. It silenced his permissive mother, the entire courtroom, and eventually millions watching in disbelief. The way Tyler spoke, the blatant disrespect he showed toward a judge with over 3 decades of experience, triggered a response that would later be discussed in parenting circles, teacher break rooms, and even therapy sessions. Judge Judy didn't simply rule against him. She delivered a powerful lesson in accountability that would alter the direction of his life. Before showing the exact moment Tyler insulted Judge Judy to her face, calling her a Karen and mocking her as outdated, it's important to understand who these people were and what led to this intense confrontation, because this wasn't just about one rude comment or one ruined garden. This was the result of years of behavior getting worse, enabled by a mother who avoided discipline and directed at vulnerable people who became easy targets in a world where Tyler had never faced real consequences. Tyler Mason was a clear example of modern parenting gone wrong. At just 12 years old, he had built a TikTok following of 50,000 by creating content that mocked adults, disrespected authority, and celebrated getting away with behavior that would have brought serious punishment in earlier generations. His single mother, Jennifer Mason, had spent the 3 years since her divorce trying to be the cool parent, the understanding one, the friend, rather than the authority figure her son needed. She worked as a marketing coordinator and earned a decent income, which she spent freely on Tyler, buying him the latest tech, expensive shoes, and anything else he asked for. Saying no felt like conflict, and conflict reminded her too much of the marriage she was still trying to recover from. In Tyler's world, accountability didn't exist. When he talked back to teachers, Jennifer defended him and blamed the school. When he got suspended multiple times, she claimed the system didn't understand creative kids. When neighbors complained, she dismissed them as overly sensitive and encouraged Tyler to ignore the criticism, using the same language he used about negative comments online. Over the past year and a half, she had already paid thousands of dollars to neighbors just to make problems disappear, avoiding any legal consequences for Tyler and maintaining the illusion that everything was under control. It wasn't. Tyler was becoming more entitled, more defiant, and more convinced that his online popularity made him untouchable, that adults were there to be mocked, and that consequences were for other people. The person who would ultimately change everything was 72-year-old Eleanor Rodriguez, a retired teacher who lived next door. For 30 years, she had cared for a garden that was not just her pride and joy, but a living tribute to her late husband. Eleanor represented patience, dedication, and a kind of love that doesn't fade with time. Her garden wasn't just filled with plants. It held memories. It was a reflection of her 40-year marriage to Eduardo Rodriguez, who had passed away from cancer 3 years earlier. He had planted the first rose bushes when they moved into their modest home decades ago, working the soil with his bare hands because they couldn't afford proper tools at the time. Over the years, that garden became something remarkable: rare plants, unique rose colors, and specimens so valuable that professionals had offered to buy them for thousands. Eleanor always refused. To her, they weren't just flowers. They were a connection to Eduardo, a reason to keep going, something to care for every single day. She lived simply, relying on a small pension and her teacher's retirement. She drove an old Honda Civic that Eduardo had maintained before his illness. She saved money wherever she could, wore clothes she'd owned for years, and lived modestly in every way. Except when it came to her garden. That garden received her full attention. Special soil, careful watering systems Eduardo had set up, and hours of daily care. Every morning, she spent 3 hours tending to it, talking to Eduardo as if he were still there, sharing her thoughts, asking for guidance, keeping their connection alive. Neighbors understood not to disturb her during those early hours. That time was sacred. Tyler Mason had moved in next door just a year earlier, when his mother bought the house during her divorce, and from that moment on, everything began to change. In the beginning, the disturbances were small, loud music now and then, the usual noise you'd expect from a kid, nothing that truly troubled Mrs. Rodriguez. After all, she had spent 3 decades teaching middle school students. She understood that children could be energetic and noisy. But over time, Tyler's behavior grew worse. Step by step, each incident pushed the limits further than the last, each action more disrespectful than before. It began with him intentionally bouncing a basketball against the shared fence during her quiet morning hours in the garden, interrupting her peaceful routine. When she kindly asked him to play later in the day, he laughed and made sure to do it even more often. Then things escalated. He started tossing trash over the fence into her garden, forcing her to spend hours carefully removing garbage from her plants. What started as annoyance soon turned into something far more cruel. Tyler noticed that Mrs. Rodriguez spoke with a slight accent. Spanish was her first language, though she had lived in the United States for over 50 years and spoke English fluently. Still, he began recording her without permission, mocking the way she spoke. He exaggerated her accent in videos he uploaded to TikTok, adding captions like, "My crazy neighbor," and "Why are old people so weird?" For a woman who had spent 15 years teaching English as a second language and helping immigrant children succeed, being mocked for her accent was deeply painful. It was something she had worked so hard to refine over decades. She tried approaching Jennifer Mason about Tyler's behavior. Jennifer gave a half-hearted apology, promised to speak with him, and then did nothing. The videos continued, and the harassment only got worse. Then came the morning that changed everything. Mrs. Rodriguez woke up at 6:30, just like she always did. She made her coffee and stepped outside, ready to begin her usual time in the garden with Eduardo. What she saw shattered her. Her roses, her beautiful, irreplaceable roses, were gone. Not naturally withered, not damaged by disease, but completely destroyed by chemicals. Someone had deliberately poured strong weed killer on every single rose bush. 40 years of care, of love, of memories tied to Eduardo, reduced to blackened stems and lifeless petals. The destruction was not random, it was intentional. Whoever did it made sure every plant was ruined. Mrs. Rodriguez fell to her knees in the middle of the garden, surrounded by the dying remains of what meant so much to her, and cried in a way she hadn't since the day her husband passed away. She might never have discovered who was responsible if Tyler hadn't made a mistake driven by his own arrogance. He recorded himself doing it. He uploaded the video to TikTok with a caption mocking her, calling it a prank, and laughing about how easy it was to upset older people. In the footage, he could be seen climbing over the fence at night, pouring chemicals onto each rose bush, while joking about how she would react when she found them destroyed. Tens of thousands of followers watched it. Many reacted with laughter, fire emojis, and praise, calling it an pick prank. But a few people who knew Mrs. Rodriguez were horrified. 3 of them sent her screenshots of the video, unable to believe what they were seeing. At 72 years old, Mrs. Rodriguez did something she had never done before in her life. She took legal action. Her late husband had always believed in resolving issues through calm conversation and understanding. She had carried that same belief throughout her years as a teacher, dealing with difficult students and parents with patience and reason. But this situation was different. This wasn't something that could be talked through. Tyler had committed a serious act, documented it himself, and faced no consequences at home. She filed a police report, which brought in juvenile authorities. But the real accountability would come through small claims court. She filed a case seeking compensation for the damage to her roses and for the emotional pain of losing something that could never truly be replaced. Experts she consulted confirmed that plants of that age and rarity couldn't simply be restored. Decades-old root systems produced unique blooms that new plants could never replicate. If anything, she had undervalued what she had lost. What she didn't realize was that this case had already caught deeper attention. When Tyler Mason's name came across Judge Judy's desk, it triggered something. With decades of experience handling thousands of family-related cases, her instincts told her there was more beneath the surface. She instructed her team to investigate thoroughly. What they uncovered revealed a troubling pattern. Behavior that had been steadily escalating, shielded by a parent unwilling to enforce discipline. They discovered prior incidents involving other neighbors that had quietly been settled with money. They found school records showing repeated suspensions, notes from teachers describing increasingly aggressive conduct, and evaluations suggesting intervention was needed. They even uncovered deleted social media clips that showed Tyler repeatedly targeting vulnerable individuals for online content. Judge Judy spent several nights reviewing everything. By the time she entered the courtroom, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. She was truly angry. The courtroom, meanwhile, carried its usual atmosphere. Cameras rolled as the audience, many longtime viewers, settled in, expecting another routine case. Most had come to watch what they assumed would be a typical dispute, ready to see someone entitled finally face consequences. Production staff wrapped up their final preparations while the bailiff stepped into place beside the bench. No one in that courtroom had any idea they were about to witness a moment that would later be analyzed in parenting discussions and shared by millions as a powerful example of what happens when consequences finally catch up to someone who believed they were beyond them. Mrs. Rodriguez entered first, walking carefully, her steps slow from years of kneeling in garden soil. She wore her best dress, a simple floral piece she had bought many years ago and maintained with care, believing that good clothing should last if treated properly. Her daughter walked beside her for support, holding a folder filled with evidence, photos of the garden before and after, printed screenshots of Tyler's TikTok video, expert statements from horticulturists, and old pictures of Eduardo planting the very first roses decades earlier. Moments later, Tyler and Jennifer Mason walked in, and the mood in the room shifted instantly. Tyler strolled in as if he were heading into a mall. His AirPods Max covered his ears, and his phone was held up in front of his face as he scrolled, likely through TikTok, completely detached from the seriousness of the situation. He didn't acknowledge the bailiff, didn't glance toward Mrs. Rodriguez sitting nearby, and showed no awareness that he was in a place where respect actually mattered. Jennifer followed behind him, dressed neatly in a blazer and slacks. Her face showed clear anxiety, the look of someone who understood the gravity of the situation, but felt powerless to manage her own child. She kept trying to get his attention, lightly touching his shoulder, urging him to put the phone away, to sit properly, to at least appear respectful. Tyler brushed off every attempt. His posture and attitude made it obvious. He didn't respect his mother, didn't take the situation seriously, and had no idea he was about to face someone who had spent decades holding people accountable. Judge Judy observed their entrance quietly, her expression calm but focused, like someone carefully studying every detail. She noted his slouched posture, his dismissive gestures, the unmistakable sense of entitlement. She had seen countless defendants over the years, but something about this young boy set off every instinct she had developed through decades of experience. When the bailiff called the court to order, Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. A faint, controlled smile appeared, the kind longtime viewers recognized as a sign that something serious was about to unfold. She had already formed her initial judgment within seconds, and now she was ready to peel back the layers of arrogance this child carried. One by one, she began the proceedings with her usual sharp precision, her voice cutting cleanly through the room. Mrs. Rodriguez, you are suing Tyler Mason for $3,200 in damages to your property. Tell me what happened. Her tone was formal, but there was a subtle edge beneath it, as if she already understood far more than what had been presented on paper. Mrs. Rodriguez spoke with visible emotion, her voice trembling as she described the garden Eduardo had started decades ago. She explained how those roses symbolized their entire life together, how she spent every morning tending to them while speaking to the memory of her husband. She presented the photographs. The before images showed a stunning garden, rare flowers in vivid, almost unreal colors. The after images revealed devastation-blackened stems, wilted petals, clear signs of intentional destruction. Then the courtroom screen displayed Tyler's TikTok video. An audible gasp spread through the room as people watched a 12-year-old casually narrate the deliberate destruction of an elderly woman's most treasured possession, laughing as he described how she would react when she found everything ruined. Throughout the entire testimony, Tyler remained slouched in his chair. One AirPod still sat in his ear, and his phone rested low in his lap beneath the table, where he assumed it wouldn't be noticed. There was no remorse on his face, no empathy, no understanding of the harm he had caused. He rolled his eyes when Mrs. Rodriguez's voice cracked. He let out an annoyed sigh when she spoke about Eduardo planting each rose by hand. At one point, he muttered under his breath, something that sounded like, "So dramatic," when she explained that some of the plants could never be replaced. Jennifer kept nudging him, whispering urgently for him to sit properly, to show respect, to just behave for a short time. But Tyler ignored her completely, making it clear to everyone in the room that he didn't respect her authority and wasn't concerned about any consequences. Judge Judy finally addressed him directly, her tone calm but unmistakably firm, a warning disguised as composure. "Young man, put the phone away now." Tyler responded with an exaggerated sigh, the kind of reaction you'd expect from someone being asked to do the simplest task. Slowly, and with deliberate attitude, he slipped the phone into his pocket, managing to make even that small action feel disrespectful. He removed one AirPod but left the other hanging around his neck, a subtle act of defiance. Technically complying, but not fully. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow slightly, silently noting the behavior and adding it to the growing list of issues she had already identified. Jennifer quickly stepped in, trying to defend her son despite knowing how weak her position was. "Your Honor, Tyler is a good kid at heart. He just made a bad decision." Mrs. Rodriguez is understandably upset, but I believe she may be overstating the value of the roses. "They're just plants. They can be replaced." Tyler didn't understand their value to her. He's only 12. He doesn't fully comprehend consequences yet. He believed it was a harmless joke for social media. Kids today grow up in a completely different environment with different priorities. I've already punished him at home. We've had serious talks about respect and boundaries. I think we can resolve this without such a large financial penalty. But everything Jennifer said only made things worse. Each excuse highlighted a pattern, years of shielding her son from responsibility, teaching him that consequences could be avoided and that his age gave him a pass. Judge Judy responded immediately, her tone precise and unwavering. "Ma'am, a 12-year-old absolutely knows the difference between right and wrong. They know that damaging someone else's property is wrong. They know that hurting someone is wrong. Your son didn't just know what he was doing. He recorded it, shared it publicly, and laughed about making an elderly woman cry. That's not a prank. That's deliberate cruelty." Then she turned her full attention to Tyler, her voice firm with authority built over decades. "Young man, look at me when I'm speaking to you." Tyler slowly lifted his gaze from his lap, where his hand had already started drifting back toward his phone. His expression showed boredom mixed with irritation, as if this entire situation was just an inconvenience. Judge Judy asked the question that would shift the entire room. "Do you understand that what you did was wrong?" Tyler answered casually, like it barely mattered. "I mean, they're just flowers. She can get more. It's not that serious." A wave of shock spread across the courtroom. Jennifer shut her eyes, as if she could erase the moment. Rodriguez's daughter reached over and held her mother's hand as tears filled her eyes. Judge Judy's expression hardened instantly, the shift so sharp that even the bailiff straightened instinctively. "Not that serious," she repeated, her voice now low and controlled. "You destroyed something that cannot be replaced, and you think it's not serious." Tyler, fueled by years of getting away with everything, shrugged. "Whatever. Old people overreact about everything." The room fell into a heavy silence, as if time itself had paused. Judge Judy slowly stood up, something she reserved for moments that demanded more than words. Every movement was measured, deliberate. Everyone in the courtroom understood they were witnessing something out of the ordinary. When she spoke again, her voice was calm, but it carried a sharp edge. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" Tyler completely misread the situation. With misplaced confidence, he doubled down. "I said old people are dramatic. You all get mad over nothing. It's the same thing every time." He even gave a slight smirk, clearly thinking he had said something clever, something his online audience would find entertaining. Judge Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Young man, let me explain something to you. I understand that you are 12 years old and already heading down a path that will make people avoid you. I understand that your mother has failed to teach you that actions have consequences. I understand that you believe your social media attention makes you important, but it doesn't. People watch, and then they move on." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing, her tone sharpening. "What you fail to understand is this: you are not special. You are not unique. You are a child who has been allowed to behave badly. And that ends today in this courtroom. You destroyed something meaningful because you thought it was entertaining. You mocked a woman who did nothing to you, and throughout all of this, you've shown no remorse, no empathy, and no respect." Tyler's smirk disappeared completely, replaced by something unfamiliar, real fear. His face drained of color as Judge Judy continued breaking down everything he thought he understood. Then she began revealing what her research team had uncovered. 3 prior incidents involving neighbors that his mother had quietly paid to make disappear. Thousands of dollars spent to cover his behavior. School records showing a pattern of worsening conduct. Psychological reports recommending intervention that Jennifer had chosen to ignore. Each detail landed harder than the last. Jennifer's expression shifted with every revelation, as it became clear that Judge Judy hadn't missed anything. She had seen the full picture, and there would be no escaping it with excuses or money this time. Tyler sat completely still as Judge Judy explained what those 40-year-old roses truly represented. How Eduardo Rodriguez had planted them while fighting cancer. How some came from cuttings taken from Mrs. Rodriguez's childhood home in Mexico, carrying decades of memories and family history. Their price tag meant nothing compared to their true value. Then came the decision that would change everything. Judge Judy awarded Mrs. Rodriguez the full $3,200 she requested, the maximum allowed. But she didn't stop there. She added conditions that hit even harder. Tyler would personally help rebuild the garden, completing 40 hours of work across 10 consecutive Saturdays under supervision. He would not be allowed to use a phone during that time. He would write a formal apology by hand, without any digital help. His TikTok account would be permanently deleted, and every video involving Mrs. Rodriguez removed immediately. He would be banned from all social media for 6 months, with monitoring to ensure compliance. Jennifer would be responsible for enforcing every condition, or face consequences herself. The punishment was precise. It removed the online validation Tyler depended on and forced him to confront the harm he had caused face to face. Tyler's reaction was instant. Tears poured down his face as he protested that it wasn't fair, that his account couldn't be taken away, that people followed him and cared about him. The irony was clear. For the first time, he showed real emotion, but it wasn't about hurting someone. It was about losing his online identity. Jennifer broke down completely, crying as she admitted she only wanted her son to like her, that she didn't know how to be strict, that she thought she had done her best. Judge Judy responded, her tone slightly softer but just as firm. "He doesn't need a friend. He needs a parent. This behavior has been allowed for too long, and it ends now." When Tyler tried one last time to argue, shouting that she didn't understand, she cut him off with final authority. "Sit down and be quiet. The real world doesn't care about your followers. It doesn't care about your excuses. And it certainly doesn't care about your attitude. You're going to spend 40 hours fixing what you destroyed. And maybe you'll learn that respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn by giving it first." Case dismissed. Leave my courtroom. The silence afterward was overwhelming. For several seconds, no one moved. Then the audience rose to their feet in applause. Tyler walked out beside his mother, head lowered, carrying a kind of shame he had likely never felt before. The footage spread rapidly, reaching tens of millions of views, and becoming one of the most talked about courtroom moments ever. But the real change happened later. Over the course of those 10 Saturdays in Mrs. Rodriguez's garden, something shifted. Slowly, Tyler began to change. The work, the routine, the direct accountability. It all started to reshape him. He began to understand consequences, to recognize the value of people beyond screens and attention. By the final Saturday, he was asking Mrs. Rodriguez to teach him Spanish, while she showed him how to care for roses. And somewhere along the way, an unexpected bond formed between a boy who needed to learn empathy and a woman who still believed that with patience, structure, and care, even the most misguided child could find a better path.